Coming up on Avant Technology Insights with Ken Presti. Big changes are a source of angst and anxiety for every enterprise decision maker. Today we're taking a closer look at how unified communications as a service might meet your company's needs. We discuss key verticals in which this technology is especially useful, as well as how to spot differentiators, stage an effective proof of concept, and ultimately make the best decision. Welcome to Avant Technology Insights. I'm your host, Ken Presti. The link between solving business challenges and cutting-edge technologies has become tighter and more complex than ever before. In this podcast series from Avant Research and Analytics, we help enterprise decision makers sort through the business case, the value, the challenges, and ultimately the bottom line of technology adoption. So listen to us at your desktop. Take us in the car, tune in from the commuter train, or download us at the gate. You'll find us on Apple, Spotify, and Google, as well as in more than 25 countries listening to us right now and available across the globe. So, Jed, I'd like to welcome you to the program today. Our subject is UCaaS, which in this day and age has become really a hot topic given the movement towards telecommuting and, remote staffs and things along that line. How are you seeing this part of the industry as different right now relative to where it was even just a couple of months ago?
I think over the last few years, and I'll get to even just the last few months, over the last few years, there was still unbelievably the challenge of convincing people that cloud for communication was still the right approach. And I think we've seen that drastically change over the last 2 years. And leading, really until the last 3 months, I think it's a given. Coming into 2020, you never hear that. There's a lot of talk about compliance around emergency services, compliance around storage, recordings, etc. But it has moved entirely off of is over the top or with MPLS or SD-WAN, is it capable of being able to handle the type of communication and the advanced communication that people traditionally had with legacy PBX? Night and day transition, really even within the last 2 months. I think with the unfortunate events that are happening today, that's accelerating even faster.
So are you seeing a lot more interest in general from the market, or how is that playing itself out? How is your experience today different from what it had been all that time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in the past, you would see a lot of large enterprise step away and consider UCaaS when they had what we would call a burning platform, something that they wanted to migrate off of because of cost or age, legacy, needing new functionality, etc. That it was, in my opinion, the norm, over the last 10 years, where a big transition that I believe we see now is really around digital transformation and change management. What does it mean to empower your employees to do their job even better and communicate better? I believe now we're seeing not just heads of IT, but also in HR, sales, really step up and be involved to really think about how does communication as a whole across the company start to transform, and that inevitably involves what they want to get off of or what they want to move to, but the crux of what is instigating change, in my opinion, has drastically changed very recently over the last year to two. That's driving a lot of new business and new needs.
So those changes would be along the lines of, like you mentioned before, there's a platform that's sunsetting for whatever reason. Would outages be another one of those? And what are the more common occurrences that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on a few of them. And that continues, as SaaS grows within enterprise. Even today in 2020, you hear from so many large enterprises the pain of outages being typically coming from their on-premise utilities and the cost that's associated with maintaining those. We're also seeing those who did take the plunge into SaaS earlier, 2, 3, 4 years ago, looking for other vendors, new vendors that have a better track record from a uptime, stability, and quality standpoint. So those are two big shifts that we see. The other would be, I think it's very prominent now, in March of 2020, large aspect is also the changing working force. Not just the demographics, but also the, commute time. Cities are becoming more expensive. Uh, Being able to actually be in the office, depending on what your role is more challenging than I think ever in the
Mhm.
history of large enterprise work. And so I think the end user need and how easy it is for an end user to jump to something else, be that FaceTime, WhatsApp, you name the consumer experience outside of IT's control, being able to easily pick up something and use it to be able to get their work done, it's easier than ever before. And so I think for a lot of people in IT, it really is the perfect time where they're starting to see that need from their end users, let alone the business cost and complexity associated with it that can help drive this transition.
Are you seeing any particular verticals that are especially well attuned to it or can, really derive some distinct advantages compared to other verticals?
Yes, but I'll perhaps answer that saying every vertical is has a need, right? Has and to your point, there are specific verticals. I think manufacturing, education, healthcare, retail. Retail is going through massive transformations in terms of how they compete, how they can stay ahead of their competitors. If you think about what communication is, it really defines your business, how you're communicating internally, how you're making decisions, who your bottlenecks are, where they are, how you're communicating with your customers. So, not just powering the voice for those experiences, but giving deep analytics radically can change industries. And I think retail is one of those that's catching on really quickly, as is manufacturing, of understanding what that ROI looks like because it can be directly tied to numbers. And we see a lot of other industries like healthcare, et cetera, also starting to understand that, but they're lagging a little bit behind. Um, the other place I think would be not quite a vertical, but the complexity of medium sized business growing into larger enterprise and therefore having a much larger global footprint. In my mind, also accelerates this need to look for a vendor that can help them across multiple uh, not just demographics, but geographic locations and the compliance needed around emergency services, around data retention. The more countries you're in, the more complex the problem set is, and you start to look at the vendors that can actually help you there.
Right, and that makes sense. We're used to thinking of UCAS as something that connects people to other people, but we're also living in a time of the Internet of Things, and we're looking at, artificial intelligence and smart cities and smart factories, and of course, computer-aided design has been around a long time. Is there a component of UCAS that relates to those sorts of things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think you hit on a few there. In particular, AI. I think one of the things we're seeing, and quite a few analysts out there talk about the large percentage of the attach rate when a enterprise is looking at a contact center solution. They will look for the UCaaS provider, typically the two together, because that makes a lot of sense. What those platforms start to look like, how they integrate with the tools, be that AI for sentiment analysis or post recording analysis, whatever it is, those start to really make dramatic shifts in the way that enterprises are able to communicate and handle their communication with their customers. I think another approach that we see is what the assisted reach out with customers, be that over chat as part of omni-channel in the contact center to a visitor stepping into the lobby of a business. And how a lot of those scenarios are now being automated over voice as opposed to chat to really help those flows feel more human ultimately.
So one of the things that I've run across from been doing a number of these interviews, obviously, and one of the things that I've been hearing about again and again is that it's In the case of UCaaS, it's a lot more difficult to maintain competitive differentiation at the technology level because as soon as one company comes up with a capability and they think, okay, we're going to stake our ground here, somebody else comes up with that same type of capability in the next, 60, 90 days, 120 days, whatever. But it's hard to keep that differentiation for one company in particular. How do you, when you're looking at things, when you're road mapping your technology, you're road mapping your products and services, what do you look at in terms of maintaining that differentiation? What are the key things? And I mean this broadly, not just in terms of Fuze, but what are the main things that customers ought to look at in terms of choosing one provider over another?
If I had one single word to describe what I believe really differentiates the best of class in any industry, would be simplicity. And what I mean by that, that's not a lack of features, that's not a lack of being able to handle complex scenario, but it's being able to address the end user and therefore customer need in the most simple ways possible that bring an intuitive experience, that bring the simplicity of picking something up and using it right away. Reliability is a part of the way that we talk about simplicity at Fuze. And another example of something highly complex that we talked about a little bit earlier, multi-country, multinational enterprises, global enterprises that have needs in various countries. That is very complex. Yet the solution can be very simple if you have one platform that can handle all of those and really hides the complexity behind the scenes. So that's the way that when we think of Fuze in our product and our product roadmap, is what are the ways we can take what is complex today? An example being this conversation that we're having right now. I might call you on your mobile device if that's the only thing I have. But what does it mean for us to easily and seamlessly transition to video screen sharing and a much more collaborative experience?
Mhm.
And still today, even though there's a lot of unification happening out there, that's complex. That requires a lot of different types of exchange to get into the right optimal solution and not have echo, a lot of different scenarios. And those are the problem sets that we think, it's not about the features, it's about how we can simplify what that experience is and those flows so people can forget about the tech and focus on how they're communicating with the person internal with them, their customers, between companies. Reducing that complexity, I think, is what ultimately differentiates the best from the rest.
It's interesting whenever we talk about complexity versus simplicity, there's that old saying about, there being the mystery and the complexity is basically what people turn to the tech industry for. But on the front end, in terms of where the end user is using it, everything needs to be as simple as we can make it. And that obviously you know better than I do, how difficult that is to actually accomplish. But when you're in the middle of a sales cycle with a particular customer and you're basically displacing their phone system, so they're going to be a little bit concerned about this under the best of circumstances. And now you're doing some proofs of concept, and you've got maybe some different types of variables out there. What are some of the main things that you need to look at in that proof of concept? So take your Fuze hat off for a moment, if you will, and look at it from the standpoint of the enterprise decision maker who's now in the midst of doing a proof of concept. What are the sorts of things that they ought to be looking at to determine which solution to buy?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and in the spirit of completely taking off the Fuse hat, regardless of what the solution is, I think traditionally in technology and in enterprise, we think of POCs as a functionality trial of
Mm-hmm.
understanding whether or not the solution can ultimately has the utilities to complete what we need to do. I think that has rapidly transitioned into uh, really work or change management. Truly understanding what are the needs that we have as a business, not the checklist, the features. What are the needs we have a business? How do we work today, and how do the solutions that are in front of me, how do they help me solve that? And as I mentioned earlier, in a simplified way. And a big part of what I start seeing now, and I think as a company in general we do, but in the spirit of not just Fuse, the partnerships that happen between customer and vendor, it's about them being a partner not just a one-way point solution. Because the truth is, post POC, there will always be new scenarios that the limited set of people who were part of the POCs didn't necessarily encounter, right? There's always the what you don't know about how your business runs that you discover every day. And so, I think a big differentiator there for the best of class in any industry are the ones who truly partner with those customers, so that even post POC, it's as if it never stopped, right? That learning, that understanding, that how can your vendor of choice solve your needs, not just the ones you tried, but the ones that will come up in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or as is happening around the globe everywhere, as things change every day. And are you finding the right vendor for your different problems and solutions that can adapt?
That's awesome. Jed Brown, Senior Vice President of Product at Fuze. I want to thank you so much for being our guest here today. Some great insights on UCaaS and also the human aspect of it as well, which we haven't heard yet on this podcast series. So I want to thank you very much for your time today and your contribution and your expertise.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ken. Really appreciate the opportunity.
You've been listening to Avant Technology Insights with Ken Presti, featuring information and opinions on how key technologies can be leveraged to solve business problems. Avant Technology Insights is a service of Avant Communications, an IT decision-making platform for next-generation technologies. All opinions expressed are those of the guests and the host. For more information, please visit www.goavant.net. That's www.goav as in victory, ant.net. For Avant Research and Analytics, this is Ken Presti.